Government of Gujarat. He has also worked in energy and transportation policy research with uh, various national and international stakeholders. His keen interest in knowledge markets led him to initiate WeGovernance, an organization which works to strengthen the governance knowledge network by providing research, execution, and networking support based on the knowledge economy principle. Hi, Chinmay. A very warm welcome to the discussion today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Subhi.
Great. So, Chinmay, today we are going to talk about governance factors. You came in the first episode as well, and we talked about the standards and frameworks. So, this time it will be governance factors with you.
Yes, Subhi.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Chinmay, broadly, how is governance connected with business responsibility and sustainability? Please tell us.
Yeah. So, if you have seen the news, there are two major cases in this 1 week only: Lafarge and Google. Lafarge Cement has to pay $780 million in fines to the US government after pleading guilty to conspiring to provide material support to ISIS and Al Nusra in Syria. And Competition Commission of India fined Google about 1,300 crores for anti-competitive practices and abusing its dominant position in multiple categories related to Android services. So there are, and also many cases around the world which are about greenwashing by various brands. So these cases suggest us that governance-related issues could result into huge economic and reputational losses. So in ESG, the G is to ensure management effectiveness, policy effectiveness, workforce productivity, investor confidence, and thus maximize the value. So relevant elements will include corporate governance, board effectiveness, board independence, transparency, accountability, participation, policy advocacy positions, capacity building, partnerships, cooperation, developing improvement systems, responsible and ethical structures, policies, rules, everything. So if you look at these individual components, transparency means you operate, communicate, perform in a way that it is easy for others to see what is going on, what is happening, what actions are being taken up, what systems, what policies are in place, etc. Accountability compares to answerability, account giving, liability, responding positively to the expectations. It also sometimes amounts to the blameworthiness, meaning that your stakeholders can actually blame you or hold you accountable for either doing something which is not expected out of you or not doing something that is expected out of you. Participation would mean involving stakeholders in all the decision makers. Capacity building means awareness, visibility, training, education of internal and external stakeholders. Then having systems, policies, practices in place for ethical, responsible business conduct and productivity improvement. And there are also partnerships and cooperations to leverage on mutual capacities with partners. Uh,
Right.
it's also about
Right.
your positions related to policy transitions and advocacy, lobbying. And based on your business purpose, how are you aligned with the policy processes? If there's any gap, how much is that gap, and how are you going to bridge that gap? If
Right.
you look at various publications, corporate board um, includes, I mean, the topics include board diversity. So do board members represent stakeholder diversity? Do they have enough knowledge or capacity to deal with the risk and opportunities? Is executive pay linked with specific achievements? So whether they are adequately incentivized or not? What is the extent of ownership? What is the extent of control they have throughout the organization and the value chain? Whether accounting practices are accurate and transparent or not. Corporate governance related topics will include uh, policies related to business ethics, anti-competitive practices, tax transparency, anti-corruption, and anti-bribery practices. All of this is
Right.
required because the potential damage to stakeholders, markets, investors, and workforces can be catastrophic. So robust governance policies reduce the exposure to corruption and mismanagement, provide license to operate by managing risk and stakeholders, increase investors' trust, consumer confidence, and thus corporate value. So the more pressure is growing for public scrutiny, the connection between responsible governance, risk reduction, and value creation is getting stronger. Yeah.
Right. And definitely. And what are the important governance factors for ESG reporting and due diligence?
We talked about the different standards and frameworks in the first episode. So SDG, now we'll talk about specific governance factors. So SDG has three principles associated with governance. Principle 12, which is about sustainable consumption and production patterns. Principle 16, which is about building accountable and inclusive institutions. Principle 17, which is about global partnerships for sustainable development. GRI does not specifically mention governance, but most of the related issues are covered under economic events. So there are general disclosures, there are standards for diversity and equal opportunity, there are standards for procurement, standards for anti-corruption, anti-competitive practices, and tax-related behavior. If you look at national framework, which is national guidelines on responsible business conduct, so there are again three principles which are related to governance, and uh, this framework has given everything on governance related matters in detail. So principle one is about businesses should conduct and govern themselves with integrity and in a manner that is ethical, transparent, and accountable. So develop and put in place structures, policies, and procedures, ensure that they are understood and adopted throughout the organization, its value chains. Take responsibility for statutory obligations, fair competition, and ensure that organization treats all stakeholders in equitable manner. Address conflict of interest, pay taxes, ensure that the business does not engage in illegal, abusive practices or bribery, corruption, and take necessary actions if such issues are detected. There's principle 4, which is about businesses should respect the interest of and be responsive to all its stakeholders, which is to ensure that the business assesses impact of their policies, decisions, products, operations on all stakeholders and the national environment, which also means engaging with them in developing policies and processes that impact them, commit to resolving differences, redressing grievances in just, fair, and constructive manner. Enable all stakeholders to benefit fairly from the value generated by the business. That is the overall message. And there is third principle 7, which is about businesses when engaging in influencing public and regulatory policy should do so in a manner that is responsible and transparent. So businesses operate within national and international policy framework, and they engage with governments to raise concerns or influence the policy matters. But they should do that through collective platforms such as trade and industry chambers and associations. So ensure that advocacy positions are consistent with the overall policy framework and they promote fair competition and respect human rights. There is framework by TCFD, which is very much focused on incentive-based climate requirements. So governance-related disclosures inform investors, lenders, insurance underwriters, and other stakeholders about how senior management tracks and manages climate-related risk and opportunities. They also have given remuneration framework, which indicates how directors and managers are incentivized to achieve climate-related objectives. Some examples are how employees' annual bonus is linked to investments in climate-related products, mapping of climate goals on long-term incentive scorecard for directors, mapping of performance against emissions targets for remuneration scorecard. And there is also another framework, stakeholder capitalism by WEF, which has given a very comprehensive approach to governance in ESG. And it emphasizes on 5 principles: governing purpose, quality of governing body and composition, stakeholder engagement, ethical behavior, and risk and opportunity oversight. In governing purpose, the purpose should create value for all stakeholders, and also how it is embedded in all the policies of the organization. about the governing body and composition, whether they have competencies related to economic, environmental, and social issues, whether the remuneration is mapped with company's purpose and policies. Is it an executive body or non-executive body? The level of independence of the body, tenure of individuals, other positions and commitments, gender dynamics, whether there is a membership for underrepresented social groups, what is the extent of stakeholder representation in the body. Stakeholder engagement for all material issues impacting them have to be considered. In ethical behavior, there are three subcategories. First, about anti-corruption. Second is about ethics, advice mechanisms, and reporting mechanisms, which talks about internal and external mechanisms for seeking advice and reporting concerns related to ethical or say unethical or lawful, unlawful behavior. And it also asks about reporting monetary losses which are coming from unethical behavior. So the examples that we saw about Google and Lafarge are the examples of monetary losses because of the unethical behavior. Anti-corruption requires percentage of members, employees, partners who have gone through the training related to anti-corruption policies and procedures. Number and nature of incidents of corruptions, impact of these incidents on in terms of finance and value. There is fifth, which is about monitoring risk and opportunity oversight. So the material risk and opportunities for the companies and not generic sectoral risk that you talk about. Companies' appetite with this risk and how those risks and opportunities have moved over time and what was the response to those changes. And also they have to mention about capital allocation for the materiality identified. So where and when the capital will be deployed.
Right. So, yeah, so coming out transparently is, I mean, the key point in every ESG scenario, I
Yes.
think, be it the ethical issues or, saying, reporting the monetary losses also. So being transparent is the key issue here. So now tell me, effective grievance mechanisms are expected to be legitimate and accessible, predictable, equitable, transparent, rights compatible, and a source of continuous learning. For operational level mechanisms to be effective, they are expected to be based on engagement and dialogue. What systems, procedures, roles, and rules for receiving complaints and providing remedy are provided by the companies?
So grievance mechanisms are very effective for stakeholder engagement to address the concerns and complaints of stakeholders. They flag risk. They are perpetual in nature. So even the issues which are not identified during environmental impact or assessment or social impact assessment or human rights impact assessment or such other feasibility studies, they capture even those. Okay. And they also provide hyper localized data from case to case and time to time basis. So they provide good reflection on risk throughout the value chain with significant granularity and scale. So the more diverse your stakeholder base is, the more complex and diverse your grievance mechanism will be. If you look at some of the concerns by these stakeholders, say, to give you the examples, project affected people in infrastructure sector, they are related to issues in consultation processes, rehabilitation, resettlement, encroachment, losing livelihoods, legacy issues, access to land, water, forest, influx of migrant workers. If you look at employees and workers' concerns, working hours, working conditions, health, safety, accidents, harassments, discrimination, fraud, ethical issues, corruption, related reporting, well-being, accommodation, benefits, insurance, sometimes family integration in case of migrants. Customers raise concerns about greenwashing, frauds, freedom of choices, quality, delivery, product safety, traceability, after-sales services, complaint handling, etc. And from civil society organizations, NGOs, you will get concerns related to all public interest matters. Say, for example, pollution, nuisance, forced labor, child labor, product risk, environmental risk, bribery, corruption, frauds, resource extraction, deforestation, etc. So Our impact materiality will provide risk matrix mapping of areas from where grievances are expected. So based on that matrix, we'll have to develop a grievance management structure. And there are 6, 7 stages of grievance mechanism: reception, review, authentication, investigation, remediation, improvement, and oversight. So for receiving complaints, we have to be careful. It's not possible to cover all concerns and grievances through a single communication channel or by using just a few options. Because even if we do it, we will not be able to address the barriers in receiving complaints. Barriers because of language, complexity of the process, involvement of multiple parties, legal characteristics, administrative characteristics, lack of trust, lack of awareness, fear of retaliation, power and resource hierarchy. So it is important to use multiple channels, and especially channels which are preferred by stakeholders. And those various channels could be physical meetings, public meetings, workshops, expert roundtables, individual consultations. You can also use PRA methods, like key informant interviews, FGTs, etc. You can also deploy internet portals, hotlines, emails, SMS, voice calls, WhatsApp-based portals, customer support, complaints, and liaison officers. There are also third-party based options available, say through partnerships with NGO, unions, community development organizations, community leaders, local officials, consultants, social auditors, media reports. All of this will help you. Using the digital platform is important because it helps improve transparency and accessibility. So dashboards, portals, apps help collection of complaints at scale, and they also make it easier to review and analyze later on to further develop the corrective plans or response plan. And to ensure the accessibility, the mechanism should have right level of outreach, awareness, training, and capacity building components. So to ensure accountability, you have to assign the clear responsibility and incentives for each stage against the impacts given in the metrics to functional heads or persons responsible to run those operations or departments.
Right. Right.
For specific issues and actions which are not related to any functions, dedicated persons from other teams can also be identified. It will matter how grievances are being addressed, whether the company's response is adequate or not. There has to be sufficient information, evidence to support that. And that's why transparency in reporting and communication is important. So reporting impacts in the right format and right frequency to the right audience. To ensure legitimacy, mechanisms should be handled by persons with right qualification and skills who have working knowledge of impacts, have grievance handling skills such as communication, negotiation, conflict resolution. Other important aspect is protection, sensitivity, and confidentiality. For example, for sexual harassment cases, how to protect victims from power structures, how to protect the dignity and reputation of the person. Such constructive questions could also be helpful in developing mechanism. And most important part, ultimately, mechanisms should provide resolution, solution, or alternatives. So you also have to ensure that the proactive investments you have made in such mechanisms are greater than the crisis events and their impacts in real financial and social value terms. You can use different methods of social impact assessment to identify that. And if they are not, so if the investments are not greater than the impacts, then review the mechanism and make changes by reiterating the entire process.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's about all the effective grievance mechanism. You have told us all the possibilities that one should keep in mind, and there should be transparency and all. Now, tell us, how are companies building momentum on reducing their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions?
So scope 1 covers direct GHG emissions, and scope 2 covers emissions by the use of energy. Scope 3 covers indirect emissions generated along the life cycle of the goods and services produced. So companies can adopt carbon management hierarchy of remove, reduce, replace, and offset. We can actually bifurcate strategies into 2 separate categories: which is based on the timelines and the approaches. First is transition strategies, which is based on medium term and available options. So companies can develop emission reduction projects either through re-engineering or adopting newer technology for the operations. Um, they can look for improving energy efficiency through audits, advice on equipment's use, ratings, conservation, demand side management. They can use renewable energy or low carbon energy. There's also another major strategy to improve resource efficiency through circular economy approaches, reduce, recycle, reuse, repurpose. So reducing the use of virgin products, increase the circularity of products, increase the lifetime of products used, substitute the materials with low carbon intensity. In doing so, you can also develop partnerships for material flow assessment, government to business, business to business, business to customers, cooperation programs, training and capacity building activities, skilling, raise finance for circular economy models, etc. Not all these models have
And
matured, but most industries are identifying the ways to integrate circularity in their value chains. Companies can
absolutely.
also adopt green procurement policies throughout their value chain to source circular and low carbon materials. But that will be, I think, part of scope 3 emissions. They can also develop internal carbon pricing mechanism and see if there are direct benefits in transitioning to low carbon energy options. There is also an option of carbon offsetting by which you neutralize your emissions by supporting projects that reduce carbon emissions elsewhere. For example, forest restoration projects. And
Right.
then the second strategy, which is based on long term and which is based on the technologies which are under different development stages, uh,
Hmm.
which is about decarbonization. So
Right.
it includes electrification of all production and distribution processes. It will
Hmm.
depend upon the carbon intensity of electricity purchased. Second is
Right.
hydrogen and its derivatives based models. If you see, there is a use of pure electrolytic hydrogen in direct reduction of iron, useful in iron and steel industry. There are also
Hmm.
fuel cell EVs used in heavy
Hmm.
trucks in China. There's also
Right.
first fleet of hydrogen trains started operating in Germany. So
So many
substitution of fossil fuels.
technologies, yeah. So many new
But most of them,
technologies are coming in.
yeah, but most of them are at pilot stage and
Hmm.
demonstration stage or early stages of development and not
Right.
available at scale. And some of them are not so
Hmm.
cost effective. So it is difficult. So right
Yeah.
now companies are relying more on transition strategies.
Right, right. It
Yeah.
will definitely take time for these technologies to come in the running mode from the pilot mode, definitely. So, Chinmay, we are running out of time. So, any specific advice that you would want to give on practices that the companies must follow to ensure a positive development?
I think in this well-connected world, the organizations should build partnerships and cooperation to proactively engage for higher human development efforts, responsible business environments, and sustainable habitats. Engage with policy and legal processes to look for public goods, public interest, and positive impacts to stakeholders and the environment. Address their reporting and data systems related gaps. Communicate and work towards individual and collective outcome commitments. Develop youth leadership, invest in human capital, capacity building to
Hmm.
accelerate the efforts and value creation. And also give attention to low carbon and inclusive supply chain, identify needs, routes, technologies, challenges, opportunities to consolidate the attention and build on the efforts
Hmm.
for the transition. Provide positive and
Right.
clear signals for this shift. Be open, seek advice, listen to opinions of experts because outside views
Hmm.
are very important to offset internal biases. Yes, I think
Hmm.
that should do a lot.
Right, right. Absolutely. So I think we have got a lot of nice recommendations from you, and I I hope many of us have learned few new things from you as well, Chinmay. Thank you so much for being here with us. It was definitely an insightful session with you, and a big thanks to our audience as well. And anybody who has any queries regarding this topic, you can write to us on info@icce.com. And ICCE wishes you a very happy Diwali And may this festival of light bring happiness, peace, and knowledge in your lives. We will be back at the same time next week. And if you don't want to miss out on any updates or future conversations, do follow our social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great evening and happy Diwali to all of you. Happy Diwali, Chinmay.
Happy Diwali to you too, Surbi. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, bye bye.
Bye.